I was working as a barista in Vienna, Austria. An American tourist came in and ordered a coffee, then looked around confused. He asked me, "So, where are all the kangaroos?" I politely informed him that he was in Austria, not Australia. He argued with me for a solid 2 minutes, insisting his travel agent booked him a flight to see the kangaroos and that I, a local, must be the one who was mistaken about the name of my own country. He left in a huff, complaining that Austria was falsely advertising itself. My tour group in Rome was standing before the Colosseum, and I was giving my speech about its history and eventual fall into disrepair. A man in a bright red USA hat interrupted me. "Hold on, I'm a construction guy, and this doesn't make sense." I paused. He continued, "Why would they build it with all these holes and broken parts? It looks like they just gave up. Was it a budget issue? In America, we finish our stadiums before we open them." I spent 5 minutes explaining earthquakes and 2 millennia of history, but he just kept muttering about shoddy Roman contractors. I was waiting tables at a bistro in a small village in Provence. An American couple ordered a bottle of our finest local rosé. I presented it and poured a taste. The wife then flagged me down. "Excuse me, we need some ice for this." "It's not cold enough." I tried to explain very politely that in France, we don't put ice in wine as it dilutes the flavor. She looked at me with utter disdain and said, "Honey, I'm from Texas. It's hot. I want ice in my wine." "Are you going to tell me how to drink my drink?" I brought her a glass of ice, and she plopped the cubes into her $50 rosé with a loud clink. While working at the front desk of a hotel in Iceland, a guest called down in the middle of the night, furious. "Your advertisement promised the Northern Lights. I've been looking out my window for an hour and I don't see anything. Are you going to turn them on, or do I need to ask for a refund?" I had to explain that the aurora borealis is a natural phenomenon, not a light switch we control. He sounded genuinely disappointed, as if he'd been scammed by nature itself. In a crowded market in Marrakesh, I watched an American woman try to buy a lantern. The vendor told her the price in Moroccan dirham. She pulled out her phone's calculator, did a conversion, and then announced loudly, "I'll give you $10 for it." The vendor politely refused, asking for the local currency. She replied, "But the dollar is stronger. You're making a profit. Don't you people understand basic economics?" She seemed to think the US dollar was a universally accepted currency that vendors should be grateful to receive. I was on a train from Florence to Venice. An American family was sitting across from me. As the train pulled into the Santa Lucia station on the water, the teenage son looked out the window with a horrified expression. He turned to his dad and yelled, "Oh my God, Dad, look! The whole city is flooded. Is this because of that global warming thing?" The father patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, son. I'm sure they have a plan to pump it all out for the tourists tomorrow." At a restaurant in southern Spain, an American couple was struggling with the menu. The waiter, who spoke excellent English, came to help. The husband said, "We just want some tacos. You know, with the crunchy shells, ground beef and yellow cheese." The waiter explained that they were in Andalusia, and that was more of a Tex-Mex dish. The wife chimed in, "But you're in Spain, and Mexicans speak Spanish, so you should have tacos. It's the same thing, right?" I was guiding a tour at the Tower of London. We were discussing the crown jewels. A woman from California raised her hand and asked, "So, does the Queen have to, check these out from the library when she wants to wear them? Or does she just come here with a key? It seems really inconvenient to keep your jewellery so far from the palace." She envisioned the Queen of England needing to make a special trip across town to get a necklace. A friend of mine is a flight attendant. On a flight to New Zealand, an American passenger asked her if the pilot could try to avoid flying over the ocean because he had a fear of water. She had to pull out a map and show him that New Zealand is, in fact, an island nation in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and that avoiding the ocean was geographically impossible. He asked if they could at least fly over the shallow parts. Overheard in a German bakery in Berlin, an American tourist points at a pretzel. "What's that squiggly bread?" Baker: "Das ist eine Brezel." Tourist: "Okay, cool. Can I get one of those, but without all the salt? I'm on a low-sodium diet." The baker just stared at him, holding the salt-covered pretzel, completely speechless. The man's wife then added, "And do you have any ranch dressing for dipping?" I was working at a hotel in the historic centre of Amsterdam. An American guest complained that his room was too small and the stairs were too steep. This building is a clear fire hazard. In the US, this would be illegal. You should tear it all down and build a proper hotel like a Hilton, with elevators and big rooms. I explained that the building was over 300 years old and was a protected historical monument. He replied, "Well, that's just poor planning." On a bus tour through the Scottish Highlands, the driver was pointing out ancient clan lands and historic castles. A woman from the back of the bus shouted, "This is all very nice, but where are the battlefields where they filmed Braveheart?" "I want to see where Mel Gibson fought." The Scottish driver took a deep breath and explained that the movie was largely fictional and filmed mostly in Ireland. The woman sounded betrayed, saying, "Well, what's the point of coming to Scotland then?" At a pub in Ireland, an American loudly declared, "I'm Irish too. My great-great-grandmother's cousin was from here." He then ordered a black and tan. The pub went quiet. The old bartender leaned over and said, "Son, we'll pour you a Guinness and we'll pour you a Bass. But in this pub, we pour them in separate glasses. You can do with them what you will." The historical ignorance was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was on a safari in Tanzania. In our group was an American who was very disappointed by the lack of animal sightings in the first hour. He asked the guide, "Can't you just, call them or something?" "Don't you have a special sound you make?" At the San Diego Zoo, the animals are always out. The guide had to patiently explain that we were in the wild and the animals were not on a schedule for our entertainment. In a Tokyo subway station, I watched an American tourist get increasingly frustrated with the ticket machine. He wasn't trying to read the English instructions. Instead, he was just pressing the screen harder and harder, shouting, "Work! Come on, you stupid machine!" A Japanese teenager politely came over, pressed the English button for him and walked away. The man didn't thank him, he just said, "About time they got with the program." A guest at my hotel in Quebec City, Canada, asked me where he could exchange his US dollars for Canadian money. I directed him to the currency exchange. He came back later and said, "Why do they have the Queen on their money? I thought this was Canada, not England. Don't they know they're not a colony anymore?" I tried to explain the concept of the Commonwealth, but his eyes just glazed over. At the ancient city of Pompeii, a tourist was looking at the famous plaster casts of the victims of Vesuvius. He turned to his wife and said, "It's amazing how they all posed for the statues before they died. They must have known it was coming." Really captures the emotion of the moment. He genuinely believed these were sculptures, not the final moments of actual people. I was working at a cafe in Helsinki, Finland. An American asked me if we had any regular coffee. I showed him our drip coffee. He shook his head. "No, I mean like a Starbucks Frappuccino." "You guys have Starbucks here, right? It's an international brand." I told him the nearest one was a few blocks away. He sighed dramatically. "Ugh, you'd think a capital city would have one on every corner. It's so inconvenient." On a boat in the Galapagos Islands, the naturalist guide was explaining Darwin's theory of evolution and how the unique wildlife inspired it. An American woman interrupted him to say, "That's just a theory, you know. We don't believe in that in my state. Can you just show us the funny-looking birds and skip the liberal propaganda?" The guide, a man with a PhD in biology, was stunned into silence. An American tourist in a Parisian fromagerie cheese shop pointed at a wheel of Roquefort. What's wrong with that cheese? It's all mouldy. You shouldn't be selling that. It could make someone sick. The shopkeeper, a proud Frenchman, tried to explain that the blue veins were the entire point of the cheese. The tourist wasn't having it. In America, we throw away food that has mold on it. It's called food safety. I overheard a conversation at a hotel in Bangkok, Thailand. A young American was on the phone with his bank back home. He was shouting, "What do you mean my card was declined? I'm in Thailand." "No, I didn't tell you I was traveling. Why would I? I'm still on Earth, aren't I? It's not like I went to the moon." He could not comprehend why his bank would need to know he was on the other side of the planet. While visiting the DMZ between North and South Korea, an American in my group asked the US soldier guiding us, "So, if we just walked over there and told them about freedom and cheeseburgers, you think they'd just give up and tear down the fence?" The soldier gave him the flattest, most tired look I have ever seen on a human face and simply said, "Sir, I highly recommend you do not try that." In a restaurant in Lima, Peru, a tourist was complaining that his steak was undercooked. He had ordered it medium rare. He called the waiter over and said, "This is all red in the middle. I can't eat this. Can you take it back and microwave it for a few minutes until it's brown?" The entire kitchen staff seemed to collectively die a little inside when they heard the request. I was working at a gift shop at the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland. An American came to the counter with a postcard and asked, "What time do you guys turn the fog machine off? We want to get a good picture, but we can't see anything." I had to look outside at the thick rolling sea fog that is famously characteristic of the Irish coast, and explained that it was, in fact, real fog. I was on a bus in New Zealand when it passed a huge field of sheep. An American tourist gasped and said to her husband, "Oh, look, honey, it's the famous New Zealand sheep. They're so fluffy." Then she turned to the person next to her and asked, "Are these the ones they use for the wool, or the ones they use for the lamb chops?" As if they were two entirely different, specialized breeds of sheep. In a hotel in Oslo, Norway, an American was trying to pay with a credit card that was declined. The receptionist explained that his bank was likely blocking the transaction for security. The man got very angry. "That's impossible. I have a premium American credit card. It works everywhere. Your machine must be broken. This country's technology is probably just not compatible with American excellence." A tourist at the Dead Sea was confused. He asked the lifeguard, "So, if I swim out far enough, will I get to the Mediterranean?" The lifeguard had to explain that the Dead Sea is a landlocked salt lake, not an ocean. The tourist looked disappointed. "So it's a dead end? That's a stupid name for a sea. They should call it the Big Salty Pond." I was working at a pub in Manchester, England. An American ordered a pint. When I served it to him, he looked at the glass and said, "This is bigger than a pint." I assured him it was a standard imperial pint. He argued, "No, in America a pint is smaller. This is too much beer." I then had to give a grown man a lesson on the difference between US customary units and British imperial units. At a memorial site for a battle in World War I in Belgium, the ground is still uneven and pockmarked from shelling. An American tourist turned to the guide and said, "Your groundskeeping here is terrible. You'd think for such an important place, you'd level the field and plant some nice grass. It looks really unkempt." The guide just quietly said, "Sir, the ground is sacred. We leave it as it was." In a coffee shop in Amsterdam, a tourist asked the barista where he could find the red light district. The barista gave him directions. The tourist then asked, "Is it safe?" "I heard it's full of drugs and stuff." The barista replied, "Sir, you are currently in a coffee shop that sells marijuana legally. The red light district is just a few blocks away." The irony was completely lost on him. I was on a tour of the Palace of Versailles. An American woman was looking at the opulent Hall of Mirrors. She said to her husband, loud enough for everyone to hear, This is nice and all, but it's a little gaudy. It's like what a rapper would build if he had a king's money. I prefer the more understated elegance of the White House. A man in a souvenir shop in Iceland was looking at a chunk of volcanic rock for sale. He asked the cashier, "Is this real lava rock from a volcano?" The cashier said yes. The man then asked, "Is it still hot?" He was genuinely concerned that the rock, which had been cooled for centuries, might still retain some of its volcanic heat. At a hotel in Madrid, a guest called the front desk at 2 p.m. "Hi, I'd like to make a dinner reservation for 5:30 p.m. I politely explained that most restaurants in Spain don't even open for dinner until 8 or 9 p.m. He was outraged. "That's ridiculous, that's bedtime. How does anyone eat that late? Don't you have an early bird special?" I was on a flight from the US to Germany. The American next to me was looking at the flight path on the screen. He saw that we were flying over Greenland and said, "Why are we flying over Greenland? It looks so empty. Can't we just fly in a straight line? It would be faster." I had to pull up a globe on my phone to explain the concept of great circle routes and why a curved path on a flat map is the shortest distance on a sphere. In a market in Seoul, South Korea, an American was trying to buy some street food. He pointed at a dish and asked the vendor, "Is that dog?" The vendor, who spoke a little English, looked offended and said, "No, no, pork." The tourist then proceeded to ask about every single item at the stall. "Is this dog? What about this? Is this dog?" He was perpetuating a stereotype while genuinely trying to order lunch. A tourist in the Australian outback was on a tour and the guide was pointing out different types of venomous snakes. The American asked, "Why don't you guys just, get rid of them? Pave over the desert or something? It seems really dangerous to just have them slithering around everywhere. In Arizona, we have signs." At a train station in Switzerland, an American was marveling at how punctual the trains were. He said to a local, "It's amazing. Your trains are always on time." The local nodded proudly. The American continued, "You guys must have learned that from the Germans, right? They're famous for being on time." The Swiss local's friendly smile immediately vanished. I was working at a tourist information centre in Bath, England. An American couple came in and asked what there was to see. I mentioned the famous Roman baths. The husband said, "Oh, we're not really into swimming. Do you have anything historical to see instead?" He did not make the connection that the 2,000-year-old Roman baths were, in fact, the most historical thing in the city. On a tour of a fjord in New Zealand, the guide mentioned that the area was used for filming parts of The Lord of the Rings. An American tourist's hand shot up. "So where are the castles?" "We've been driving for an hour and I haven't seen Minas Tirith or Helm's Deep. Did they tear them down after filming? That's a real shame. They could have made a lot of money." He thought the giant CGI fortresses were real buildings. In a restaurant in Mexico City, a tourist called the waiter over. "Excuse me, my water is broken." The waiter was confused. The tourist pointed at his glass of water. "There's no ice in it. It's just wet." He then asked for a bottle of Evian, saying he couldn't trust the local water, even though the restaurant used a state-of-the-art purification system. An American in a London pub asked the bartender for a Bud Light. The bartender politely said they didn't have it, but offered a list of excellent local lagers and ales. The American scoffed. "No Bud Light? What kind of backwards pub is this? You guys have heard of America's favourite beer, right?" He then settled for a glass of water, looking utterly disgusted. At the Great Pyramids of Giza, I overheard a teenager complain to his parents, "This is so boring. It's just a bunch of big triangles in the desert. Why couldn't they have built it somewhere more interesting, like Las Vegas? At least there would be a buffet and a pool." His father nodded in agreement, adding, "And air conditioning." I was on a bus in rural Japan, and an American tourist was trying to pay his fare. He was holding a crumpled handful of yen coins and bills, and he just could not figure it out. He finally gave up, shoved the entire handful of money at the driver, and said loudly, "Here, you figure it out. It's all just Monopoly money to me anyway." The driver, a very patient man, painstakingly counted out the correct fare and gave him back his change. A tourist in Stockholm, Sweden, was complaining about the prices. "Everything is so expensive here. A coffee costs like $7. How do you people afford to live?" A local standing nearby replied, "Well, our wages are higher, and we have universal health care, subsidized education, and..." The American cut him off. Yeah, socialism. I'd rather have cheap coffee, thanks." While visiting a beautiful ancient cathedral in France, an American tourist was looking up at the vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows. He turned to his wife and said, with complete sincerity, "It's beautiful. It reminds me of the big church at Disney World. They did a really good job of copying that."